If you've ever wanted to communicate something and you really need it to land, keep watching, because I'm going to share a perspective and a practice that will help increase the impact of your message manyfold. By the way, I'm Michael Ravenwood, and I'm an empowerment coach that throws real lightning bolts. So if the things that I say in this video make sense to you and you'd like to transform your life in 90 days, use the link in the bio or message me. So I coined this phrase a while back. Storytelling is a technology of consciousness. Now, what does that even mean? So if we think of our consciousness as our awareness or our experience of life, then a technology of consciousness is a way that we can manipulate or change that experience. And for thousands of years, storytelling is the way that one generation has introduced the next to the things that they don't have a reference for. I'll give you an example. If you try and tell a young man, you really ought to be humble. Being humble is really important and blah, 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 blah. And you try and explain it, and that person doesn't have any reference point for it, it's probably not going to land. But if you tell that young person that once there was this man, and he went to this market, and he thought he really knew everything about what everything should cost, and he went ahead and spent all his money on these things that he thought he was going to be able to sell later on somewhere else, and then later he realized that he couldn't sell those things, and if he'd only asked his friends who were elsewhere in the market what they thought about the price of it, then he might have avoided that cost and that pain and suffering. Then that young person, without actually ever having to have that experience themselves, can walk through it in their mind and understand why humility might be important. They've actually done scientific studies in which they demonstrate that when people are hearing a story, their brains are far more active than when they're hearing an explanation. It's also been shown in studies that if we imagine that something is happening, the same kind of neural activity happens as if it's actually happening in real life. As long as we visualize what we'd really love to see, or what we're already grateful for, or tell ourselves or listen to the stories that we know are enriching and true. And this limitation that the brain has in deciphering what's actually happening from what we're imagining can actually be to our advantage. That's why it's really important to have a regular practice of gratitude, of visualizing the things in your life that you're really grateful for, the things that bring you joy, the things that are already in your life that are going right. And that way, you can release all the kinds of brain chemicals that are associated with those kinds of experiences. In this way, you can lower your stress and boost your immune system. Another consequence of this understanding is that we have to pay particular attention to who's telling us stories. We have to ask ourselves, why would this person be motivated to tell me this story? Or, for example, if there's a person who's telling you a story that actually is costing them a lot, you might think a little bit more that might be valid, what they're saying. Now, this has to be understood on a case-by-case basis, but just understanding what the motivations or intentions are of the people that are telling you stories can really help a lot in determining whether or not you want to accept them with a grain of salt. So the practice that I'll offer you is this. If you're really needing to communicate something to somebody, tell them a story. If you really want to communicate something to somebody and you want them to understand you, perhaps share the story of how you experienced them or experienced your life and what feelings you had. Perhaps find examples out of history or even in modern times which represent the idea that you have that you'd like them to understand. This kind of a practice can help things that are normally abstract to become really practical and understandable for people around you. So if anything I said in this video made sense to you, put story in the comments. If you put story in the comments, then I'll know that my message landed. Or if you happen to be tired of the life you're living and you want to transform it in 90 days, use the link in the bio or message me.